Welcome to Biz Wire. I'm Joseph Nordstrom in Beijing. Gender discrimination in the workforce in China is worse today than it was over 3 decades ago when the country began to open up and have less state control over its economy. As China has moved towards a more market-oriented economy, women have often found themselves the first to be laid off and the last to be rehired. There has also been a resurgence in pressure on women to abandon their efforts to pursue higher education and to focus instead on getting married before they become too old or too successful to find a husband. Studies show that women professionals in China face more sex discrimination now than they did 20 years ago. The South China Morning Post writes that support groups inspired by Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, have formed in Beijing and Shanghai to challenge this resurgence. During a visit to China last month, Sandberg met several Lean In Beijing members and then wrote a statement on her Facebook page about the situation for women in China. She says the fact that women could be seen as too educated to be desirable for marriage in a country with 24 million unmarried men shows that cultural norms about the balance of success within couples runs deep. But researchers say this wasn't as prevalent 20 or perhaps even 10 years ago. Statistics from the All China Federation of Trade Unions also show women's declining representation in the corporate world. In 2011, women made up about 32% of companies' board of directors, a decline of 11 percentage points compared with 2005. In May, Lida Hong Fincher wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying that women in China's cities are losing ground fast. Fincher says there's no doubt that there is much more gender discrimination in hiring in China now than a generation ago. Fincher is a PhD candidate in sociology at Tsinghua University and author of the upcoming book, Leftover Women, The Resurgence of Gender Inequality in China. Fincher writes that China's urban employment rate for working-age women fell to a new low of under 61% in 2010, down from over 77% 20 years earlier. Fincher cites census figures saying the 2010 rate was over 20 percentage points lower than that of men. Fincher says the decline in urban women's labor participation looks even worse if you go further back to the end of the 1970s, when studies show that over 90% of working-age women in the cities were employed. Fincher says this is in large part because of structural changes and market reforms. Earlier, when the state had a larger hand in the planned economy, the Communist Party mandated gender equality in the workplace with jobs assigned to men and women. But by the mid-1990s, as market reforms took off, there were massive layoffs and a women return to the home movement emerged, calling on women to quit their jobs to make way for men in a time of rising unemployment. Fincher says over the years, the resurfacing of these more traditional attitudes about gender roles have taken hold. This inequality could erode many of the gains China has made in recent decades and shows progress does not always march in a straight line. You're watching Biz Wire on the Blue Ocean Network, China's first and only privately owned broadcast media. All of our stories can be seen on our website, BONTV/biz-wire. In just a second, we'll continue with more insight into the big picture of China's economy.